Max Thornhill stared at the gelatinous blob quivering indignantly before him, its translucent pseudopods gesticulating wildly as it made what he could only assume were rude gestures in 17 different alien dialects. Look, Glorb, or whatever your name is, I don't care if your species considers toilet facilities a demeaning construct of solid-state oppression. The rules say every prisoner gets 1 shower cycle per standard rotation. So either you flow your goopy self into that cleaning chamber, or I'm adding biological hazard violation to your rap sheet. The blob gurgled something that Max's translator diplomatically rendered as procreate with yourself, oxygen-dependent waste of carbon. Max sighed and checked his wrist terminal. Only 2 hours into his shift at Nexus maximum security detention facility, and he was already dealing with this nonsense. Such was the life of a human prison guard in the galaxy's most notorious penitentiary, 4,000 of the Confederated System's worst offenders, and not a single one of them the same species as him. Humans, the blob bubbled condescendingly. Think you're so special because you evolved on a nightmare planet. Max rolled his eyes. Here we go again with the Deathworlder speech. Humanity's homeworld, Earth, or Terror Firma, as the galactic community had nicknamed it, was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. To non-humans, it was a hellscape of crushing gravity, toxic oxygen levels, extreme temperature variations, and terrifying predators. The fact that humans not only survived there but thrived was something most aliens found both impressive and deeply unsettling. Listen, buddy, Max said, pulling out his enforcement rod, a fancy name for what was essentially a glorified cattle prod. I've got 98 more inmates to process before lunch. So either you take your shower voluntarily, or I introduce enough electrical current into your cytoplasm to make you glow like a Venusian lava lamp. Your choice. The blob reluctantly oozed toward the cleaning chamber. Max smiled. Another crisis averted through the fine art of human diplomacy which, in prison guard terms, meant the careful balance of threats, sarcasm, and the implied promise of violence. His comm unit chimed. Officer Thornhill, report to administration immediately, came the clipped, nasally voice of Administrator Phlox. Max groaned. The Velduran Warden was the most pompous bureaucrat in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. 7 feet tall, with iridescent blue skin, 4 arms, and a head crest that changed colors based on his mood. Phlox had the unique ability to look down on everyone both literally and figuratively. On my way, sir, Max replied, signaling to his colleague Officer KZT over the shower duty. The Nexus facility itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive hexagonal structure suspended in the gravity well between 3 dwarf stars, making escape virtually impossible. The prison housed everything from methane-breathing crystal entities to silicon-based hive minds, each in specially designed containment units catering to their biological needs while neutralizing their particular talents for violence, theft, or interstellar fraud. As Max walked the long corridor toward administration, inmates called out to him from their cells. Hey, Thornhill. When's the next protein delivery? This synthetic garbage is dissolving my tertiary stomach. Officer Max. Tell that 4-armed blue dictator that my religious practices require access to quantum computing. Max nodded and waved without stopping. In the 3 standard years he'd worked at Nexus, he'd learned that acknowledgement without commitment was the key to inmate management. When he arrived at administration, Phlox's head crest was pulsing an angry orange. Never a good sign. Officer Thornhill, Phlox began, his 4 arms folded in what Max recognized as posture configuration 7, administrative disapproval. We have a code amber situation. The transport carrying Draz'Kul will be arriving in 20 minutes, and you've been selected to handle intake. Max blinked. Draz'Kul? The Scorian warlord who led the Halaxian rebellion? The very same. Phlox's crest shifted to a smug purple. The Galactic Corrections Department specifically requested a human handler. Apparently they believe your species' inherent, how did they phrase it? Terrifying adaptability makes you uniquely qualified. Lucky me, Max muttered. Indeed, Phlox agreed, missing the sarcasm entirely. Do try not to get disemboweled. The paperwork would be absolutely dreadful. The docking bay hissed open, revealing a transport ship flanked by 6 heavily armed guards of various species, all looking distinctly nervous. In their midst, bound by energy restraints and wearing a neural dampener around what passed for his neck, stood Draz'Kul. Max had seen Scorians before, but never one so imposing. 7 feet of armored exoskeleton, 4 massive arms ending in serrated claws, and a face that looked like someone had crossbred a praying mantis with a particularly angry wood chipper. The most disconcerting feature, however, was the eyes, 6 of them, arranged in a hexagonal pattern, each a different shade of red. Officer Thornhill, the lead transport guard, said, thrusting a datablit at Max. Sign here. Acknowledging receipt of prisoner XJ72819, alias Draz'Kul. Warning, subject displays enhanced strength, secretes mild neurotoxins through exoskeletal glands, and has demonstrated telekinetic abilities when agitated. Fantastic, Max said, signing the tablet. Any other good news? He's refused nutrition for 3 days and bit off the appendage of the last guard who tried to force-feed him. Max studied the prisoner. Which appendage? The guard was Flotarian. It was one of their less essential tentacles, but still. Good to know, Max said, taking control of the prisoner's restraints. Welcome to Nexus, Draz'Kul. I'm Officer Thornhill. I'll be handling your intake process today. The Scorian's mandibles clicked in what Max's translator interpreted as laughter. A human? They send a soft, fleshy primate to handle me? Your species is barely out of the trees. Those trees were on a planet that would liquidize your internal organs in about 5 minutes, Max replied cheerfully. Now, if you'll follow me, we need to get you processed and settled into your new home for the next 750 standard cycles. Draz'Kul's eyes narrowed simultaneously, a neat trick Max had to admire. I will escape this pathetic facility within 1 rotation. And when I do, human, I will wear your skin as decorative plumage. Promises, promises, Max said, leading the prisoner down the corridor. Between you and me, the food here isn't great, but it's better than starving yourself. And you might want to dial down the threats. The last guy who talked about wearing parts of me ended up cleaning waste extraction pipes with his sensory appendages. As they entered the processing area, Max noticed how other inmates backed away from Draz'Kul, even species that typically feared nothing. The Scorian warlord had a reputation that transcended planetary systems. Strip search, Max announced, pointing to a large scanner. Standard procedure. Draz'Kul's mandibles clacked aggressively. I will dismember any being that attempts to remove my personal armor. Max sighed, pulled out a small device from his belt, and pressed a button. The energy restraints around Draz'Kul's 4 arms suddenly constricted, sending the massive alien to his knees. Let me explain how this works, Max said, crouching down to eye level with the Scorian. This isn't a negotiation. This is me telling you what's going to happen, and you doing it. The sooner you understand that, the easier your time here will be. He released the pressure on the restraints. Now you can either cooperate with the standard intake procedures, or I can call in a team with sedatives strong enough to knock out a Jovian space whale. Your choice. For a moment, the two stared at each other, the human and the Scorian warlord, locked in a battle of wills. Then, surprisingly, Draz'Kul's mandibles relaxed slightly. You have unusual courage for prey, he said finally, beginning to remove his armor. Or perhaps you are simply too stupid to recognize superior predators. Max smiled. Maybe both. Welcome to Nexus, Draz'Kul. I have a feeling we're going to get along just fine. 3 weeks after Draz'Kul's arrival, Max was making his usual rounds in Cell Block D when he noticed something strange. The normal social groupings had shifted. Typically, inmates clustered by biological compatibility, methane breathers with methane breathers, silicon-based life forms with their crystalline counterparts, and so on. But now Max observed cross-species groups forming, with Draz'Kul at the center of it all. What's the word, Glibber? Max asked, pausing by the cell of a gelatinous con artist who had swindled half the Andromeda arm with a pyramid scheme involving artificial intelligence marriages. Glibber's translucent body rippled in what Max had come to recognize as anxiety. Nothing unusual, Officer Thornhill. Just enjoying another day in this fine correctional establishment. Cut the crap, Max said. You've never used the phrase fine correctional establishment in your life. What's Draz'Kul planning? Glibber's central nucleus darkened. You didn't hear it from me, but word is he's uniting the different blocks. Says species divisions are what the administration wants keeps us weak. Interesting political theory from someone who committed 3 separate genocides, Max remarked. He continued his patrol, stopping next at the workshop where Vex 427, a mechanical genius convicted of programming an entire planet's domestic robots to kidnap their owners, was tinkering with approved electronic components. How's the rehabilitation going, Vex? Max asked casually. The robot's optical sensors flickered. My ethical subroutines are being successfully recalibrated, Officer Thornhill. I now understand that mass kidnapping is wrong, even if the biological beings were not being utilized to their full efficiency. Glad to hear it, Max said. Seen much of our new Scorian friend? Vex's cooling fans whirred slightly faster. Draz'Kul has expressed interest in my technical expertise, for educational purposes only, of course. Of course, Max echoed skeptically. His final stop was the meditation chamber where Morlath, an empathic being imprisoned for emotional manipulation on a galactic scale, was floating cross-legged in the air. Officer Thornhill, Morlath said without opening its eyes. Your concern radiates from you like solar flares. Just doing my job, Max replied. Any insights you'd care to share about our newest inmate? Morlath's 7 eyes opened simultaneously. Draz'Kul harbors great anger, as you might expect. But there is something else. A coldness. A patience unusual for his kind. Is he planning something I should know about? The empath smiled cryptically. All beings plan, officer. The question is whether their plans will bear fruit. As Max left the chamber, he noticed a group of inmates from typically hostile species huddled together, falling silent as he approached. Draz'Kul was nowhere in sight, but his influence was palpable. That evening in the staff cafeteria, Max voiced his concerns to Administrator Phlox. With all due respect, sir, I think Draz'Kul is organizing something across species lines. It's unusual behavior, especially for a Scorian. Phlox's crest turned a dismissive yellow. Officer Thornhill, do you know why humans make excellent prison guards but terrible administrators? You see conspiracies everywhere. Your primitive brains evolved to detect predators in the bushes, even when there were none. Better to mistake a bush for a predator than a predator for a bush, Max countered. Poetic, but irrelevant, Phlox sniffed. Draz'Kul is secured in our highest level containment. His neural dampener prevents any telekinetic abilities. The various species housed here have biological incompatibilities that make sustained cooperation impossible. Your concerns are noted but unnecessary. Max knew better than to push further. In the complex politics of Nexus, the warden's word was final, at least officially. Unofficially, Max decided it was time to do some investigation of his own. Max was midway through his sleep cycle when his personal comm chirped with an incoming message. The ID showed it was from Glibber, which was unusual. Inmates weren't supposed to have access to staff communication channels. Officer Thornhill. Glibber's voice oozed through the speaker. I may have neglected to mention something during our conversation earlier. The nutrient reclamation system in Block F experienced an unexpected modification last night. Might be worth investigating before your bipedal administrator notices. The comm clicked off before Max could respond. He dressed quickly and made his way to Block F, which housed primarily extremophile inmates, beings that thrived in conditions that would kill most life forms. The nutrient reclamation system, essentially a high-tech waste recycling unit, appeared normal at first glance. But Max's years of dealing with prison sabotage had taught him to look closer. Behind an access panel, he found what he was looking for. A crude but effective bypass that would allow the system to be manually controlled from within the cell block. Well, he muttered, documenting the modification with his wrist scanner. What are you up to, Draz'Kul? Over the next few days, Max discovered more tampering, communication relays with altered programming, security sensors with minute blind spots, and even modifications to the atmospheric control systems. Each alteration was small enough to escape routine detection but, taken together, painted a clear picture of preparation for a coordinated event. When Max presented his findings to Administrator Phlox, the Veldaran's crest fluctuated between skeptical yellow and annoyed orange. These are trivial maintenance issues, Officer Thornhill, not evidence of some grand conspiracy. Your species' tendency toward pattern recognition is admirable in primitive survival situations but leads to false positives in civilized contexts. Sir, Max pressed, these maintenance issues create vulnerabilities that could be exploited in a coordinated attempt to. Enough. Phlox interrupted, his crest now fully orange. I have run this facility for 15 standard years without incident. I will not have a human species that still thinks projectile weapons are the height of military technology lecture me on security protocols. Max left the administrative office fuming but determined. If official channels wouldn't listen, he'd have to handle this his own way. That opportunity came sooner than expected. During recreation period in the central exercise area, Max noticed Vex 427 interfacing with the environmental control panel, supposedly performing authorized maintenance. Everything okay there, Vex? Max asked, casually positioning himself between the robot and the nearest exit. All systems nominal, Officer Thornhill, Vex replied, optical sensors avoiding direct contact. Just conducting routine diagnostics. Great. Mind if I verify the work order? Before Vex could respond, a commotion erupted across the room. Draz'Kul had apparently taken offense at something a massive Tundarian ice beast had said, and the two were squared off in what promised to be a destructive confrontation. Containment Protocol Alpha, shouted the other guard on duty, activating her restraint field generator. Max knew immediately that this was a diversion. As the other guard rushed to contain the altercation, Max grabbed Vex's mechanical arm, preventing the robot from disconnecting from the control panel. Show me what you just uploaded, Max demanded. Vex's cooling fans whirred in distress. I cannot comply. My programming prevents. In one swift motion, Max pulled a small device from his belt and pressed it against Vex's central processing unit. The robot froze as an electromagnetic pulse temporarily disabled its non-essential systems. Sorry about that, Max said, pushing Vex aside and examining the control panel. What he found confirmed his suspicions. A sophisticated program designed to trigger environmental system failures across multiple cell blocks simultaneously. Had it been activated, it would have created chaos throughout the facility, perfect conditions for an escape attempt. The fight between Draz'Kul and the Tundarian was now under control, with both aliens secured in restraint fields. But as the guards led Draz'Kul away, the Scorian's 6 eyes fixed on Max with unmistakable malice. Problem with the maintenance, Officer Thornhill? Draz'Kul called out, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Nothing I can't handle, Max replied, locking eyes with the prisoner. Just a little bug in the system. Later that day, as Max was escorting a group of low-security inmates back to their cells, one of them, a spindly Arcturan with too many limbs, made a sudden lunge at him. Max's reaction was pure instinct. In one fluid motion, he sidestepped the attack, caught one of the alien's limbs, and used the creature's momentum to flip it onto its back. The corridor fell silent. Most species in the galaxy had never witnessed human reflexes in action. To them, Max might as well have teleported. How did you move so fast? Gasped one of the other inmates. Max shrugged. I didn't. You all just move really slowly. It wasn't entirely true, but the myth of human capabilities was a tool Max wasn't above using. As he looked up, he noticed Draz'Kul watching from his cell, those 6 red eyes calculating, reassessing. Good, Max thought. Let him wonder what else humans can do. The alarms began at precisely 0300 hours, jerking Max awake from his sleep cycle. His comm unit blared with automated alerts. Multiple system failures detected. Security protocols compromised. All staff report to emergency stations. Max was already moving, pulling on his uniform as his training kicked in. He knew this was Draz'Kul's plan in action. The timing was no coincidence. 0300 was the middle of night shift, when staffing was at its minimum, and most of the administrative personnel were off duty. The corridors were bathed in the red glow of emergency lighting as Max made his way towards Cell Block D. The facility's artificial gravity fluctuated, causing him to stumble as it shifted between too heavy and too light. Status report. He barked into his comm. Environmental controls compromised in blocks A through F, came the frantic reply. Atmospheric composition being altered. Security doors malfunctioning. Some cells opening, others locked down with staff inside. And Draz'Kul? A pause. Containment breach in high security wing. He's loose, sir. Max swore under his breath. This was worse than he'd anticipated. Not just a breakout, but potentially a takeover of the entire facility. As he rounded the corner to Block D, the gravity suddenly cut out entirely. Max pushed off the wall, using the zero-G combat techniques from his training. Ahead, he could see chaos inmates of various species floating freely in the corridor, some moving with purpose, others flailing helplessly in the unfamiliar conditions. And there, directing it all with precise movements of his forearms, was Draz'Kul. The neural dampener that should have been restraining his telekinetic abilities was conspicuously absent. Officer Thornhill, the Scorian called out, mandibles spread in what passed for a smile. Just in time to witness history. The first successful takeover of a Nexus facility. Sorry to disappoint you, Max replied, anchoring himself to a door frame, but this little rebellion ends now. Draz'Kul laughed, a sound like metal tearing. Look around you, human. I control over 200 inmates. The facility systems are compromised and your reinforcements are locked in their quarters. What exactly do you plan to do? It was a fair question. Max was outnumbered, outgunned, and literally floating in hostile territory. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adapting to impossible situations. First, Max said calmly, I'm going to give you one chance to surrender. The assembled aliens erupted in what various translators rendered as laughter. And if I refuse? Draz'Kul asked, clearly amused. Max smiled. Then I get to do this the fun way. In one smooth motion, Max pulled a small device from his belt, not his standard issue restraint control, but something smaller, cylindrical. Before anyone could react, he twisted it and threw it into the center of the floating crowd. There was a bright flash, followed by an electromagnetic pulse that rippled outward. Immediately, every piece of technology in the vicinity went dead, including the artificial gravity controls. And just like that, gravity returned to Block D. Most species in the galaxy evolved in much lower gravity than Earth's punishing pull. When the sudden restoration of full gravity hit the unprepared aliens, the result was pandemonium. Bodies crashed to the floor, limbs buckled under unaccustomed weight, and aquatic species found themselves suddenly struggling to support their own mass outside of water. Only Max and a few other heavy worlder species remained standing. Draz'Kul, though staggered, recovered quickly, his exoskeleton providing enough support to keep him upright. With a roar of rage, he charged at Max, all four clawed arms extended. Max stood his ground until the last possible moment, then dropped and rolled. Years of training in Earth's gravity made his movements efficient and precise. As he came up behind the Scorian, he slapped a backup neural dampener onto Draz'Kul's carapace. The effect was immediate. Draz'Kul's telekinetic field collapsed, and his momentum carried him crashing into the wall. You primitive Draz'Kul began, struggling to right himself. Deathworlder, Max finished for him, securing the alien's arms with emergency restraints. And don't you forget it. The cleanup took days. With systems gradually restored and prisoners returned to secure cells, Nexus slowly returned to its normal operational status. Emergency teams from the Galactic Corrections Department arrived to assist with repairs and to investigate the incident. Administrator Phlox's crest had remained a subdued blue throughout the post-crisis meetings. Now, as he and Max stood in the observation deck overlooking the prison complex, it had shifted to a contemplative green. The GCD investigation concluded that had you not acted as you did, Officer Thornhill, we would have lost the entire facility, possibly with significant loss of life. Coming from Phlox, this was practically effusive praise. Max nodded acknowledgement. Just doing my job, sir. Perhaps, Phlox said, his four hands clasped behind his back, I have been insufficiently appreciative of the unique qualities your species brings to this work. The report specifically cites your intuitive threat assessment and adaptive crisis response as key factors in averting disaster. Max suppressed a smile. Those were bureaucratic terms for what humans had always called gut feelings and making it up as you go along. Thank you, sir. Though I'm still not clear on how Draz'Kul managed to remove his neural dampener. Phlox's crest tinged slightly orange with embarrassment. It appears he secreted a corrosive compound through his exoskeletal glands over several weeks, gradually weakening the device until it failed. Persistent guy, Max remarked. Indeed. He has been transferred to a specialized containment facility on Rigel 9. I doubt we will see him again. As they turned to leave, a transmission alert sounded. The holoscreen activated to reveal the stern face of Director Draz'Kul, head of the Galactic Corrections Department. Administrator Phlox, Officer Thornhill, the director acknowledged. I've reviewed the full report of the incident. While there were clear security lapses that must be addressed, the outcome validates our long-standing policy. Policy, Director? Phlox inquired. The mandatory inclusion of human personnel in all maximum security facilities, Draz'Kul explained. This incident will be added to the training materials as Case Study 47B, demonstrating precisely why we continue this practice, despite the occasional cultural frictions. After the transmission ended, Max turned to Phlox. I didn't realize there was an official policy. I always thought humans got these jobs because no one else wanted to work with the galaxy's worst criminals. Phlox's crest shifted to a hue Max had never seen before, something between amused purple and embarrassed orange. There is a classified appendix to the official hiring guidelines, Phlox admitted. I suppose after today's events, you've earned the right to know. One data transfer later, Max sat in his quarters, reading the confidential GCD document titled Theoretical Foundations for Human Integration in Correctional Services. Most of it was typical bureaucratic jargon, but one passage caught his eye. While most species evolved specialized adaptations for specific environmental niches, resulting in predictable behavioral patterns even in criminal elements, humans represent a unique case study in generalized adaptation. Their evolutionary history on a Class 12 Deathworld created problem-solving capabilities that operate outside normative galactic parameters. In practical terms, a Tundarian ice beast will always attempt to lower ambient temperatures during an escape attempt. A Floatarian hive mind will invariably target communication systems. A Scorian will prioritize acquiring weapons. These species-specific patterns make containment protocols relatively straightforward to develop and implement. Humans, however, represent the only known sentient species without a predictable crisis response pattern. Their adaptability makes them simultaneously the galaxy's most effective prison guards and its most dangerous potential inmates. In controlled studies, human subjects presented with identical crisis scenarios demonstrated solution approaches varying by up to 87%, a deviation rate unseen in any other species. Therefore, the strategic inclusion of human personnel in security operations provides a critical variable element that most inmates cannot effectively plan against. Max leaned back, chuckling to himself. After years of enduring jokes about being a primitive Deathworlder, it turned out that was precisely why he had the job. Humans weren't hired despite being unpredictable. Partially insane apes from a hellscape planet, they were hired because of it. The next day, as Max started his shift, he passed Morlath's cell. The empath studied him with all 7 eyes. You seem amused, Officer Thornhill. You've discovered something. Max smiled. Just learned why the GCD insists on human prison guards. Apparently, we're the only species crazy enough that even the galaxy's smartest criminals can't predict what we'll do. Morlath's expression shifted to what Max had come to recognize as its version of a smile. "Oh, Officer Thornhill, that's not the real reason." Max paused. "No? Then what is?" "Consider," Morlath said softly. "Out of all the sentient species in the galaxy, humans are the only ones who evolved alongside predators more dangerous than themselves. You're the only species that knows what it's like to be prey, yet rose to become apex predators anyway." The empath floated closer to the cell barrier. "The Galactic Corrections Department doesn't hire humans because you're unpredictable. They hire you because you're the only species that truly understands both sides of the cage." Max thought about this as he continued his rounds, watching the diverse collection of galactic criminals going about their daily routines. Maybe Morlath was right. Maybe what made humans special wasn't their strength or speed or even their adaptability, but their unique perspective, knowing what it meant to fear being hunted, yet learning to hunt anyway. As he passed Glibber's cell, the gelatinous con artist bubbled curiously. "Hey, Thornhill. Everyone's wondering how'd you know what Draz'Kul was planning? Got some secret human powers you're not telling us about?" Max grinned. "No secrets. I just asked myself what I would do if I were trying to escape from a supposedly inescapable prison." "And?" Glibber pressed. "Exactly what he did," Max admitted. "Which is why humans make the best prison guards in the galaxy. We're natural criminals who just happen to choose the right side of the law." He continued down the corridor, whistling cheerfully. After all, it takes a Deathworlder to know a Deathworlder.